Thanks for listening to The Handbook, the Agency Operations podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Scoro. In 1995, two Japanese researchers set out to test a hypothesis that people perceive beautiful interfaces as more user-friendly. They presented participants with bank machine interfaces with identical functionality. Just one set looked ugly and clunky, and the other set was aesthetically pleasing. The results were unanimous. People perceived the prettier interfaces to be more user-friendly. I brought in a clunky agency management platform in the past. It did everything it needed to do, but it looked like it was designed in the late 90s. My team hated it and complained about it being complicated. Scoro was a sight for sore eyes when it was time to switch. If it's a platform your team is going to spend a lot of their day in, they deserve for it not to be hideous. I write my own copy for these ads, can you tell? Sign up for a free trial at Scoro.com, or if you arrange a demo call, tell them Harv sent you. Now, let's get to the episode.
I'm Harv Nagra. I'm an operations consultant, a former in-house agency operations director, and head of brand communications at Scoro. Welcome to The Handbook, the Agency Operations podcast, a space where we talk to fellow experts and operations leaders about agency life, discussing the challenges keeping us up at night, as well as strategies that help make things run a little bit smoother.
Eyal, welcome back to the podcast. Do you remember when millennials were the lazy, entitled ones with the avocado toast obsession? Yeah, me too. Those headlines always irritated me, especially the idea that we didn't want to work hard when everyone I knew was working themselves into the ground. But now, us millennials are old news. In fact, in the agency world, we might be the old guard, and eyes have focused on a new target, Gen Z. Am I supposed to be saying Gen Z? Anyway, accusations about entitlement, work ethic, and motivation are making the rounds again. Are they true? Gen Z is meant to make up 27% of the workforce in 2025, overtaking baby boomers for the first time. Avoidance isn't an option, and understanding how to attract, motivate, and collaborate with them is a business imperative. Our guest today is Isobel Camier, and she's going to talk to us about this. She's the founder of Camier Communications, and they've commissioned research on this area, which she'll be sharing with us today. With 15 years of industry experience in PR and comms on both the agency and client side, Izzy launched her training consultancy in 2020. Working with agencies, she helps leadership to nurture and retain talent by upskilling individuals, supporting team culture, and developing leadership. Her aim and passion is about helping people get the best out of their careers. She's also a founding member of Female Founders Rise and a mentor with the Girls Network. I'm really excited to see what we can learn from Izzy about working with Gen Z. So let's get into it. Izzy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Harv.
So we are talking about generations today, and Gen Z in particular. I know there's a bit of debate often about where the lines are, but can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, Gen Z, more often than not, it's said that they're born post 1997 and then generally up to the late 2010s. So 2010 is approximately the cutoff. And they currently make up about 20% of the UK workforce, which already is a huge amount. And I think I'm right in saying by the year 2030, they will make up 30% of the UK workforce.
I've seen numbers saying in 2025, it's going to be 27% of the workforce, and numbers even steeper by 2030. So you've commissioned some research on Gen Z, and some key themes came out. We're going to be exploring those in a few moments. Some line managers, in this case, very likely millennials, making up the majority of the workforce now, might be thinking, why should we change the way we're working for this new generation coming in? Why can't they fall into line? And ironically, those millennials probably had a similar reaction from their line managers several years ago. So it's funny how things come full circle. But what would you say to someone saying, why should we make exceptions or change the way we're working?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I would say, first of all, I'd respond by asking, is what you're doing working 100% of the time? Has leadership and management in the places that you have worked never sort of evolved, changed, or has it ever been different? We also know plenty of studies and research tell us that cultures work better, or workplaces are better when they're really inclusive. So putting those two things together, in my opinion, we should be welcoming this new group and listening to them, understanding what it is that they value, what it is that they like, what it is that they want, what their preferences are, and also listen to their lived experiences. Yes, they might be younger, but why is that of any less value? It's absolutely not. So I think what should be happening is that managers, leaders should be welcoming the opportunity to learn and find out what it is that Generation Z want. There's going to be a lot of them. There is already.
Yeah.
So what, are we just going to be angry and not listen to them? We should definitely employ all the empathy skills that we have, ask loads of questions, have loads of curiosity, make sure we're also listening and listening really, really well as well, so that there's a two-way relationship, there's a dialogue, and they can understand what is needed in a workplace for it to function and to make it work and to make it commercially viable. But also we've got to listen to them. They're bringing knowledge with them that we don't have. They are complete digital natives. And that experience, knowledge, and ability and skill set is really great for the businesses that invites them in. So there's actually a two-way learning opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. There's no choice but to evolve. We had no choice to embrace remote working and working from home and all that kind of stuff because of the pandemic. And now we can't hit the brakes and resist. And evolution and change just makes us better. So it's for the betterment of the entire workforce. Like we were saying a moment ago, anything from 25 to 27% of your workforce is going to be Gen Z in 2025. That's a huge proportion. But like I said in the intro, the kind of dramatic stereotyping has already begun. Some might argue there's some truth to it. I've heard things like, let me think, there's that whole work ethic thing coming up again, that there's no passion. They're not willing to prove themselves. And there's that kind of sense of, I don't care, I don't need this. What have you heard?
I've had lots. So doing the job that I do, I go into agencies day in, day out. And it was because of what I was hearing that actually I'm here now. I would say that 9 out of 10 training sessions that I ran this year in a whole variety of different agencies and other businesses and in-house comms teams, someone of some level at some point during a session, no matter what it was on, would mention Gen Z. We're not sure how able to work with them. This is what we're finding. This is what we're seeing. And it was becoming increasingly obvious that there was a need from agencies and other businesses in being able to work out how to best go forward with the dynamic that comes with having Gen Z around. So because we've heard a lot, we were like, okay, something's going on here. Let's do the research, hence what we've done. And off the back of that, we've come up with these strategies for leaders and how best to manage and engage with Gen Z.
So there was some characteristics that came out in your research. Was there 5 or 6? I can't recall what you said.
6.
It was 6. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one. The first one was around Gen Z being values-driven and socially aware. So this is a big one. I think hopefully more and more of us are becoming more values-driven and socially aware. But what was the most surprising thing you learned about Gen Z's expectations in this area?
I'd say there's something that I'm not most surprised by, but there's definitely something that I'm most encouraged by. And that is the fact that they are value driven and they do care about what they're doing. Purpose within their work is so important to them. I think is only a really brilliant thing, right? Because the world is a bit of an inflection point. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think it's what the military returned to as we're living in a VUCA era, pretty volatile at the moment on a global scale. And if you sort of bring that back in and focus on an individual's needs, desires, or purpose, they want to ensure that their jobs are addressing something to support the world. Well, brilliant. because we need that. Every time you listen to the news or read anything, or for me, even listen to what my kids bring home in their homework, I can't believe where we're at. And it can be really devastating, and it's really sad. And I think we need Gen Z and their value-driven approach. We need them to be socially aware because there's a lot of stuff to sort out. And if they care about it, we're on the right track, aren't we?
We need somebody to care about these things and make some change. Otherwise, we're not heading in the right direction. So there was a few things that I saw in your research that you identified as areas employers can address some of these values. And that was aligning roles with the mission, fostering a culture of transparency and accountability, promoting ethical and sustainable practices. So we don't need to go into all of those, but if you had to pull on something there, how would you talk about that?
First of all, absolutely. Roles have to have a clear alignment with where the company is going and the mission of the business. They want to know, based on the point we were just talking about, how they contribute to the bigger picture. So it's up to managers, it's up to leaders to sort of tell the story and present them what's going on, how them as a cog fit into the whole thing. But also separately to that is that what an organization does internally, so its practices and how it does things, has to mirror its advocacy to the outside world. And I think that's pretty fundamental. You've got to say what you're going to do, right? You've got to walk the talk, which is absolutely something that's really crucial to Gen Z. But actually, that should be really crucial to all of us. So perhaps the second one I would say is the most important.
So being a better corporate citizen and really having a stance and a point of view on something. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday as well, who was in a bit of a dilemma about taking on a new client. What I was really impressed by was that they were having a conversation at their workplace so that it wasn't just a business decision and saying, okay, well, this is a lot of money that could be coming in and we just have to go through with it. But the fact that they were having a debate and saying, how do you all feel about this before we make this decision, I thought was really impressive.
That's a lot of transparency and honesty that is being valued, which I think is a fantastic role modeling.
Absolutely. So the next theme was around work-life balance and mental health. These were kind of hot topics that came in your research. So what did you find there?
Well, it's pretty important, isn't it? It's important for all of us, which we've learned so poignantly over the past 4 years, probably even more than that. And Gen Z hold it so dearly, we couldn't not respect it. So the sort of strategies that we're suggesting, it's the pretty obvious ones, really, about offering flexible working hours, remote working opportunities. Those are they're your bread and butter. How you work them is where there's probably margin for error. So again, it's about clarity of communication and how you let people know how they can do it. Also, don't offer them something and pull it back. I've heard that a few times this year. And it's that sort of grey area that's provided arguments, let's say, or discussions that haven't always been the most positive. Also, access to mental health resources. I think our personal life and our professional life over the past however many years have become more and more merged, particularly as we work from home now, and that barrier is a little bit more grey. And I think impact on our mental health is something that once upon a time was maybe just dealt with at home. That's becoming more in the workspace because it's probably so impacted by the place that you work. So being able to offer resources such as perhaps even counselling services or workshops on stress management and resilience, those things can be really powerful. And lastly, I think the most simple but is really good for helping to actually build trust is to actively encourage employees to take the full allotment of their time off, of their holiday. I can think of many times where, you get to like December the 1st and a leader would come around and say, well, you've still got 3 weeks left to take, or you've still got 2 weeks left to take. People would bank up loads of holiday. There should be real advocacy throughout the year. When you're taking it, you should be planning for this, even if you're not going on holiday, and cost of living makes that really difficult for people who, especially earlier on in their careers. But it doesn't have to be about big, expensive holidays. It's just about taking time off, and what does that look like for you that's going to benefit you to be a better version of yourself.
Absolutely. And I think those of us in the UK and Europe are quite fortunate in the amount of annual leave or holiday allocation we get. In North America, Canada, US, and so on, it's not as generous. So even more important if you've got smaller allocation to make
Of
sure
course.
you're
Yeah.
recharging. And that point about mental health support, I think, is so valuable. I know friends in Canada who do get unlimited therapy services as a benefit through their workplaces. And I've never heard of anything like that in the UK.
Wow.
So that is just so valuable, and it's so expensive. So if that was a perk, I think it's a huge kind of opportunity to stand out and
Absolutely.
show your
Yeah.
commitment. Okay, cool. So growth and development. So obviously these people are coming into the workforce, and this is an area you've identified. And I don't know if there's impatience there or unreasonable expectations about how quickly they can climb the ladder and all that kind of stuff. So what did you find in this regard?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point to have mentioned, actually, Harv. Growth and development is really important to Gen Z. It's in the research. I'm going to try and quote a stat. I think it's something like 57% of Gen Z respondents to a report by, I think it was the Workforce Institute, said that they expect to be promoted at least once a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but it sounds quite a bit to me, and it doesn't meet perhaps the expectations of the places that I have worked in. So if that's the case, and remember, you've got to go listen and find out, is that what they want? That clear communication will help understanding on both sides. What managers and leaders need to be doing in agencies is to sort of provide a clear pathway for what career progression is going to look like. What Gen Z need is clear expectations of how to achieve their success and it to be demonstrated and drawn out. And there's a few things that managers can do to help that.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, some of those expectations, I think, might just be part of being young and inexperienced. So I think maybe there's a bit of an education exercise and a lesson there that you need to be transparent in how the business is doing and making sure you're kind of putting the foundations of communicating this kind of financial, economic, and business performance knowledge across your team and sharing that regularly so people understand how the business is doing and so their expectations are aligned. But
totally.
I think that point around career progression is really important. I just think there's value in having that documented as well. And that's where ops people, like the people listening to this podcast, are really key. If you've got an agency handbook, making sure that's documented, how are promotions and pay rises managed, so people learn that in onboarding and their expectations are clear from the beginning. So really, really valuable points there. Did you mention training as well?
Yeah, I'd say first of all, like you said, particularly for ops people, what do development plans look like? That they need to be set out and followed rigorously, really. And then regular discussions between managers and their linees, so to speak, so that you can help set goals, which obviously need to be done together. And then highlight what it is they need to do more of, or perhaps even less of, to achieve those goals. What you can then work on together is, like you said, what training might need to be in place in order to help them achieve the goals that you have both identified. So rather than sort of offering training willy-nilly, if you like, which ends up just being a tick box exercise when people are told what they have to go on to and then they don't really want to be there. And by the way, I can always tell when those people are in the room. But it should more be about understanding those goals together, getting the linee or employee to actively want to be part of it, know that they need to be part of it, so that when they go to the training, it becomes really rich, really valuable to enable them to grow. And then they go back to the workplace, they're fired up, they're excited, and they've got some tangible things that they can help them work through. And it can be anything: online courses, workshops, full day, short, half a day, half an hour, lunch and learn are a great one. Internal, external. I think those training programs are really valuable to Gen Z. And I think the last thing I would say about this is setting up a mentor program. This can be done internally, externally, with a partnership with another organization. But if you find someone who's had a similar career or worked in a similar field, perhaps, to your Gen Z employee, having a mentor is a great way to help navigate
Yeah.
their own career. I benefited from one with the CIPR. I had an amazing mentor, lady called Ginny Patton, and it really helped me, just that sort of really high level knowledge and experience. So yeah, that's something else that could be done.
I really love that. And I wish I had a mentor at points in my career as well, so I can see the value in that. The next thing we're going to talk about was tech and innovation. So, what did you find, and what can agencies do to enable this?
Basically, agencies, they just need to get super comfortable with their tech. It needs to be streamlined, it needs to be effective. And this comes down to the really basic factor. Gen Zs, as we all know, are digital natives. They came out the womb practically on their mobile phones, I think. And they're always on them. It's really easy for them to collaborate, to produce things and communicate with people. So agencies need to be doing exactly the same thing. They need to be on top of it. They need to invest in it. And they need to ensure that all of their digital communications are really streamlined and really effective, because Gen Z already are. And this is another example of them sort of entering the workplace already with a skill set that maybe their employer doesn't necessarily 100% have. So this is, again, I think, a place where there's perhaps this conflict between sort of knowledge and value, between what one generation knows and expects versus what the other generation knows and expects. So a point on this, a simple one really, that we're all talking about at the moment, AI, agencies have got to embrace it. They've absolutely got to embrace it. Don't run away from it. Find out how your workforce can benefit from it, what platforms are helpful for them to help them be more efficient, more accurate, more creative, whatever it might be. Obviously get an AI policy in place as well. So I'd say that's pretty fundamental. And then again, it's about offering training. So yes, I might have just said that Gen Z are massively digitally savvy, right? But there's still stuff they don't know. So maximize actually upon that opportunity, invest in them going to learn more, whether it's data analysis, whether it's on AI or digital storytelling, invest in them going to learn those skills. So the employees will benefit, obviously, but your business will as well. So I think this whole investment in tech on behalf of Gen Z has actually got some real commercial basis to it as well. So invest.
I love that. I love that. A couple of things I heard just to feedback is kind of the tolerance for poor tech and workflows probably is going to be quite low because they are digital natives and they've grown up with these beautiful apps and stuff like that. And so if you're coming into something that's really clunky, that's going to be frustrating. There's going to be a lower tolerance and acceptance of that. And you mentioned the value of giving them training opportunities around the stuff that they're going to be really passionate about, like AI. But I think sometimes you'll also notice that this younger cohort has some of those skills already. So there's an opportunity to, allow them to offer training for the team and say, you go learn this and develop a bit of skill in this, and you show the rest of us how to do this great thing in design or whatever. Excellent. All right, Izzy. So the next theme was around diverse and inclusive workplaces. What did you find? And is there anything that we can take away in this area?
Yeah, basically. So when Gen Z people are looking for a job, they're actually researching and looking into, and again, there are stats that back this up in our research in the document, they say they're actually looking for an employer's commitment to diversity when they even apply to work. So to support this, what agencies need to be doing is obviously promoting equal opportunities and sort of diminishing any biases that there might be in hiring, promotions, and even just day-to-day operations. That's the sort of really fundamental thing. Encourage open dialogue, give underrepresented voices a platform. But then the final thing that I would say on sort of social issues, which organizations should feel bold enough to take a stance on, because that's what Gen Z want to see. You've got to be authentic in your support. Agencies, a lot of them will be dealing with this anyway in the work that they do, absolutely. But when you're thinking about yourself and the operations, it's good to remember that token gestures can be actually just as, if not more harmful than silence. So all of these collectively work towards what Gen Z hold dear, and that is diversity and inclusion is paramount.
Excellent. So the last theme that came out in your research was meaningful recognition. So how can agencies implement that?
Yeah, this is a pretty important one. And this relates to the sort of development and growth that we mentioned before. So Gen Z, what we have learned is that they really value regular communication. Again, it's about helping them to sort of develop throughout college, university, school. They'll have continuous feedback. It's easy for them to access electronically, and they're sort of expecting that as they continue into their careers as well. So be in a position where you can offer continuous feedback. You need really good managers that are able to conduct really good reviews. Part of this is that feedback should be constant. So not only in those reviews, but all of the time, there should be a sort of a continuous feedback loop, if you like, in the moment, highlighting what's happened, how things could be improved, what the impact was, what the impact should be if they change their behavior. Really helps with development goals. Also, workplaces should be recognizing individual contributions, particularly when it comes to sort of innovation and creative ideas. But also on the back of that, what employers and organizations should be doing is tailoring their rewards. So it doesn't just have to be financial, but how else can you recognize and appreciate Gen Z? So is it time off? Is it actually more development opportunities? All of these things to make you feel really recognized.
Absolutely. And that's something I hear, and that's something I felt a lot, is that when you're so busy in delivering the work that you really forget to celebrate sometimes.
Yes.
And also, it has been difficult times. So budgets are tighter, but there has to still be a way to do that. And it doesn't have to be splurging on a big party, but just that kind of recognition, verbal recognition, and saying thank you,
Yeah.
like you're saying, is so important.
Yeah, it's so important. I think when we hear the word feedback, we always think it's critical. We always think it's criticism, which is obviously important. We need to know how to grow. But positive feedback is one of the most powerful things that you can give as a manager. And it's something often in my sessions, I challenge people, just go and do that today. Just give one person one piece of positive feedback. The impact that can make is really big. And I think if there's one thing you could do to improve relationships with Gen Z, is to do that. Really try positive feedback.
Absolutely. I think all of us spend so much time just doubting ourselves and kind of worrying. It doesn't matter how old you are or how much experience you have. The self-doubt is always there. So somebody breaking you out of that train of thought and saying, okay, you've done this really well. It means a lot, right?
Yeah.
So that's all super interesting. So Izzy, we're going to put a link to your research and to your website in the episode notes. But I guess the key thing that comes out for me here is that none of this sounds shocking, upsetting to me, or like it's going to ruin things. And in fact, I think it's the opposite. Like all of this stuff sounds really valuable and things that all of us in the workplace would benefit from.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show that the dramatization and the negativity is needless. And in fact, it's just pushing us to be better employers and better places of work.
I couldn't agree more. It's the one thing that we noticed. It's the consistent theme of feedback that we've had from the research that we have done. Isn't it all just really good management? Wouldn't everyone from every generation benefit from these managerial and leadership suggestions? This is just good practice. And I think if we remember that, we'll do really well.
Absolutely. Really, really good advice. Quick question then. So you do this kind of coaching and training on leadership and the workforce. In relation to Gen Z, what kind of work do you do? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have got, based on what we have discovered, we've got 3 different sort of workshops, if you like, to sort of make an extension of this Gen Z research. So the first one that we offer is like a 90-minute focus group where we would come in and have a bit of a collaborative session with your Gen Z team and kind of test the insights with them, see what they think, get their feedback, and also listen to what they'd like to see from leadership. It's a bit of an extension, if you like, of what I suggested at the very beginning, I think, of different generations in Gen Z just need to listen to each other.
Okay.
The second thing that we offer based on the research and our strategies is half-day leadership program, where we would come in and we would actually help plan how you can incorporate the strategies into your organization. So very similar to the sort of bread and butter that we normally do, but very much with a focus on intergenerational management.
Okay.
And then the third thing that we have started rolling out to a few agencies is Gen Z training workshops. And actually, this is actually working with Gen Z and equipping them with the skills and for them to know how to effectively collaborate with Gen X, millennials.
So where can people go and find out more about you and connect with you?
Yes. So Camier Communications.com is our website. I am on LinkedIn, so just search for Isobel Camier. And then if one of the sessions did sound of interest to you, or indeed if you wanted your own copy of the research, we've got a deck that you could perhaps even share with clients just as a free tool. So happily send that to you. So just email me, isabel@camiercommunications.com.
Excellent. And the links and the spelling and all that kind of stuff will be in the episode notes. Izzy, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today and talk about this. I can just see the value implementing these kind of practices and policies would bring to any agency. So thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me, Harv. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent. And I hope your first podcast experience wasn't too bad. So
not too bad. I've survived, I think.
Okay.
I wrote.
All right. Excellent. Well, I'll speak to you soon. Hi, all. Welcome back. So is the finger pointing overblown? I think so. There's nothing that Izzy spoke to us about Gen Z's so-called demands that aren't something that I wouldn't love to have in place any place that I worked. A quick recap on the themes that came out in the research that she'd commissioned. Number one, being value-driven and socially aware is very important. So things you can do include creating a culture of transparency and accountability, letting people know what's going on in the business, honestly. Also, having a point of view and standing behind it in terms of ethics and sustainability. Number two, work-life balance and mental health are important. Things you can do include ensuring there isn't an expectation to work 10 or 12-hour days on the regular, having flexible working policies in place, looking into benefits packages that include support for mental health, and ensuring your team uses their full time off allocation each year. Number three was around growth and development, ensuring that you have clear career paths in place and ensuring everyone knows how promotions and pay rises are considered. And don't say you're offering training and then don't actually offer any training. Make it work. Number four was around technology and innovation. Gen Z are true digital natives, so perhaps their tolerance for bad experiences is going to be quite low. Invest in training around AI and also leverage their passion for tech and platforms to give them opportunities to run training sessions for your wider team. Number five was around diverse and inclusive workplaces. This comes down to creating a respectful environment where differences are celebrated and everyone's point of view is considered. This was another one where it backfires if you're talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And lastly, number six, meaningful recognition. Everyone wants to feel appreciated, so celebrate and shout out those wins at an individual level, but also ensure you're making time to celebrate successes as a team. One thing I got from this conversation with Isobel was to just create dialogue. If you really want to know what people want, talk to them and ask them. And you might realize that what's being said isn't so unreasonable, but will make your agency a better place to work for everyone. That's it for me this week. If you've enjoyed this conversation, maybe share it with someone who's got line management and hiring responsibilities at your agency. They might appreciate the insights. And if you'd like a cheat sheet with Izzy's advice, sign up for the handbook newsletter at scoro.com/podcast. Scroll down and look for the newsletter sign-up form. Every other week, we send out the newsletter with a summary of the episodes, so you've got something in your inbox that you can reference. We'll be back with the next episode soon. Thank you so much for listening.
This podcast is brought to you by Scoro, a platform designed for agencies and consultancies which allows you to manage your projects, finances, and resources, all from one system. This is a platform I brought in at a previous workplace which completely transformed the way we worked and which I've recommended to clients of my own. You can sign up for a free trial on scoro.com. That's SCORO.com. Or reach out to me, Harv Nagra, on LinkedIn if you'd like to hear about some of my experiences.